Facilities Operations Committee meeting to order. Thank you everybody for their patience. I was having car trouble coming in today, so hopefully it'll be finished by the time I leave. All right, so we have a full agenda today. I can see by the audience we have, must be talking about a lot of stuff. I will hand it over to Dan.
Okay,
So
would you like to do introductions?
Oh, sorry, yes. Let's do introductions. We'll start over to my right and go all the way over to my far left.
Hi, Terry Proctor, Communications Department.
Frank Cadula, Communications Department.
Jonathan Garcia, Chief of Staff.
Roseanne Powell, Manager.
Kara Bradshaw, Executive Assistant.
Gary Hollins, Board Member.
Amy Constant, Board Member. Camille Idzadabo, Innovation Studio, Center for Black Student Excellence.
Deanna White, Director of Planning and Real Estate.
Dan Young, COO.
Liz Large, Contractor General Counsel.
Monique Allen, and I am with ACMS. Alexis Cummings, ACMS.
So, can you explain what ACMS is?
Oh, sure, yeah.
I mean, just
Absolutely.
what the acronym is.
No problem. My name is Monique Allen, and ACMS stands for Allen Construction Management Services. We are a woman and minority-owned civil engineering firm, and we are providing the CM services with CBRE/Turner.
Turner Townsend here.
Turner and Townsend, I keep saying CBRE, okay, sorry.
It's changing, it's new.
And Alexis is my project coordinator.
All right, thank you.
Joe Curlier, PPS Director.
Kirsten Calvin, Real Estate Manager. Natasha Garcia, Project Manager, Office of Operations.
David Main, Communications Manager for the bond program.
Scott Johnson, Project Manager on the Tubman project.
Tracy Fagan, project manager on the Tubman project.
Jeff Vincent was studio cardiac.
Keisha Lockwood, Project Manager, Jefferson Organization. Randy Creswell, Office of Modernization.
Marshall Haskins, Athletics.
All right.
We also have Director Brady.
Oh,
Yeah, hi, Gary. I'm sorry, Chair Hollins. I'm calling in as I'm in transit, and I will be throughout the meeting.
all right. Anyone else online that I haven't recognized? Okay. Well, we'll start off now with Mr. Dan. Yep.
Okay, I want to try and share my screen. So the first topic is an update on the Tubman relocation process. In the packets is a copy of Volume 6 of the due diligence document. We also put together a quick slideshow, which is just a cut and paste from the due diligence document. So I'll share that and we can walk through it. I think we'll go through fairly quickly, and then we can get into discussion and questions. I can do this successfully. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Again, this presentation, all this information is in the packets, so we're just going to cover kind of a couple of efforts to date overview, and then we'll get into the two scenarios. This is a graphic that is on that's in the document. I think it's on page 12, and what it is intended to do is just at a very high level kind of summarize the relocation options that have been reviewed to date, so what's currently being reviewed, and what has been reviewed in the past. All information on options that were previously reviewed are in the appendices in the due diligence document. The grounding statements, everyone's probably fairly familiar with these. They have been developed over the course of this relocation effort, and there's somewhat of non-negotiables, if you will. A couple notable ones when we're looking at potential co-location options is around Tubman will not be combined and then converted into a K8 is one of them, and also the Tubman process will not alter Jefferson's programming or enrollment. And then in here we put in the site selection criteria. These are the criteria which all the options are measured against. They're here, we put them in the slide deck here just for reference. They're on pages 8 and 9 of the due diligence document. So that's just some framing as we get into more of the meat and potatoes here. In volume 6, we are looking at effectively what we call one options. We call it the different sites options. And so we have one option, but we have two different site layout scenarios. So that's the information that is in the packets. And I think Dana will just walk through some highlights.
I would just love to. So scenario one, you're gonna steer?
I'll steer.
That's good. Okay,
Yeah.
so scenario one has Tubman on the current Humboldt site where Kairos is currently located. And then has Kairos on what is considered the Jefferson South lot, for lack of a better name. And we did kind of drill down to what are the opportunities and risks on these, and spoke to some folks on our education side, try to make sure we really understand the pros and cons. I think that's been a big question for everybody. So having this co-location definitely brings both of these schools together. They can collaborate, they can work together on projects, they can share best practices, things like that. So there's an opportunity there to really create some joint programs and really bring a fuller, enriched experience to the students there. So, and then the next one. The risks are that they're small site. Humboldt is not very big, it's 3 acres. Kellogg's almost 6, so you kind of get the feel there that it'd be pretty tight. Outdoor space would be limited. Bus circulation, parking, things like that will be limited. And the same thing on the south lot for Kairos. That would be limited for them as well. Go ahead to.
Quick question.
Yeah,
So the enrollment, because we brought up Kellogg, what's the enrollment difference between Kellogg and Tubman?
Kellogg's probably twice as big. It's about 600 students.
From a design perspective, we would aim to build it to the same capacity. Current enrollment, I think that's right. I think shooting from the hip, I think Kellogg is in 600s. I think Tubman's around 350.
But the ed spec is 750?
Correct.
So that's what we would.
And I'll pull up the actual number.
Okay.
So yeah.
And is that taking in consideration the enrollment forecast as well,
Yes.
with the decline in population and all that stuff?
Yeah, we have new numbers for the next 3 years. We don't have the 10-year projection yet back from the demographers. Potentially that could change, but it looks pretty steady.
Okay.
So, and you'll notice that the benefits and risks are fairly similar between the two scenarios. The risks here, of course, are the constrained site, like I said. It also reduces the athletic program for Jefferson, and it does not align with what we sold the voters, a better term, on Jefferson when we passed that bond. So we would need to be making a significant change there to what we would be offering for athletics at Jeff. We also, as we get into.
I just want to push back a little bit on that because we didn't portray specifically any programming on that south lot in the bond request. We didn't say that we wouldn't meet ed specs for athletic programming at Jefferson, but we didn't ever specifically communicate about programming on that south lot that I'm aware of.
I think it's a fair point. There wasn't specifics. There was a master plan that was prepared before the bond and that the bond estimates were based on.
That's
and
right.
that included that south lot as a part of Jefferson.
Got it.
And then I think that's where the genesis of it.
So we looked at scenario one also with, through the scope of our sustainability, site suitability, location, things like that. And you can see on this slide how that looks. Obviously, already owning the land is a big piece that definitely helps us. And one parcel, the south lot, does not have anything on it right now except Northwest Natural Gas. And we are talking to them. They are not excited about moving that. It's a very big deal. But we're trying to see if we can. What could we do? How could we relocate
You let them know our kids are a bigger deal.
Big deal. I find threatening works.
Big deal meaning expensive, which would be our
Expensive.
cost, or just that they would rather not?
No, expensive, which we would pay for. That is our cost, but also very difficult with the street, the way that all of the utilities run through the street. And they recently tried doing this in another part of the city and it became a real mess, and now they're in litigation, so they're very gun shy about things like that. So it's more PBOT than it is from utilities than it is Northwest Central, or their fear of PBOT, if you will.
Dana, can I just
Yeah.
go back to the enrollment? I have the numbers. So Kellogg currently is at 661. Next year projected to be at 698. following 642, following that 618. So it's going to be in the 600 range. Tubman, on the other hand, currently is at 361, 329 projected next year, 319 the following, and 340. So it'll be in the 3 to 350 range.
Okay.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that.
So one thing we could consider is whether we want to, modify our ed specs for Tubman to have a smaller middle school, comprehensive middle school, given the site constraints. And that's not something that we've talked about yet. Site and cost constraints.
The next slide for scenario 1 gives an outline of the schedule. And Dan, did you want to speak to the schedule at all?
Yeah, this is a little different, I think, than the previous version, and it comes into place some of the complexities and variables around having effectively now 3 significant capital projects all happening at the same time, all in construction at the same time, but all different phasing and competing for some of the same space. One of the pieces of information that's just becoming more clear is the need for Jefferson to be able to utilize that south lot during construction as a phasing area, as a laydown area, as a place for some of their construction activities. If that's needed, which that is the plan, that would then prohibit construction or the permanent improvements on that site until after they are done with that, roughly 2029.
Okay.
So that significantly puts that work out. I'll say that there's, this is a very, high level still. We're looking at all of this. But these are constrained sites, and the other thing to remember is the Jefferson students are on site. So we do need space to be able to spread out. We can't cram too many people, too much work on that site when we have an active school there as well. So that, in this scenario, Tubman, if it's on the Humboldt site, that's not going to have that same constraint. They could go forward generally as we see the plan for design and construction, get in roughly around 2028, but the Kairos piece would potentially be pushed out a couple of years later.
But as far as Tubman goes, the current word from ODOT is that they'll begin construction in fall of 2027, right? So the students would have to be out of Tubman.
That is right. They've gone from 27, someone will yell at me if I get the number, 27 to 26, back to 27.
Right. Yes, so they move out prior to that. And the next slide has high level estimates of costs. You'll see this for both of the scenarios, and note that we would need significantly more money, which the intention would be to secure that through the next bond. But we need another 80 million, 100 million, it's like, depending on what it costs for everything. So that's, again, high level.
Well, that's total also. That's not, there's not a line on there for what we have in the bank already for Tubman replacement.
Correct, the 120 million from the state, so yeah, so anything above that.
So if you took sort of just an average, you said, okay, it's 200 million, yeah, we would need 80 more. In scenario 2, we put both schools on the Humboldt lot and then preserve the south lot for athletics. There's some opportunities there in terms of sharing resources and working together, sharing, co-locating some programs between the two schools, things like that, sharing extracurricular activities. It could be something that really brings together two student populations, essentially a K-8 experience. This very, very tight, as you can see. Both schools would be 4 stories. If we built, and maybe that's if we built to the current spec. So if we reduce that, that would definitely impact that as well. So very similar opportunities there for the two schools. And then the risks there are, again, this is a very small site. So now we have 2 schools on the small site. Really no outdoor space to speak of there, but the south lot would be open. So it also requires the passage of the future bond in order to secure the ability to do this. In terms of looking at our suitability, options here. It's academically, like I said, that's something there's an opportunity there for lots of folks to collaborate. The site is very small. We talked about that and how difficult that might be. We utilize land we already own. So there's a savings there and a sustainability objective there. This is the schedule for scenario 2, where the schools combined onto Humboldt, and it does shorten the time frame before things happen, because we don't have to worry about the Jeff construction piece. And again, the next slide tells us this is the money. So it never looks any better. You just keep going, and it keeps looking like a lot of money. So that's scenario 2. Any questions about scenario 2? Thoughts?
I have a question. So to that last slide. So this is to build a new Tubman, that it's now the high would be as much as what it costs to build a high school.
Both Tubman and Kellogg, and Kairos.
Okay. One of the things that's probably worth doing, just so that it's not confusing, is maybe if we have the ability to segment that out, just so that we know that, because otherwise, just a lot of the community conversations and the conversations we had with legislators during the last legislative session were around, obviously just around the numbers for Tubman. And so, and even during that exercise, the number went up. And so I think it might be for people who haven't been following every step of the conversation since that legislative session to understand why this number is larger.
Yeah, I think we're happy to do that. We can break that out, and we can even add, if we need to, we can add some language about the changes. I'll make one note that we've been trying to be consistent with the format of the cost, thinking that people will go back and look. And so this format is actually the exact same, at least the best recollection right now, when the ask went into the state.
Right, but it's just that when we made the ask of the state, there wasn't like, we're needing the funds to pay for two things. And so now if it looks like the overall project is gone up, over, at the high end, 100 million over what was requested, it just seems, and maybe, and I do like the consistency of the format, but maybe there's a footnote that explains that, because I say there are going to be people who haven't been following every step of the conversation, and I don't want it to be like the impression that it went from 120 million to 220 for the same project.
Yeah, I think we're happy to do that. And I'll just make one other note. I know this not. I'm agreeing with your point. We do, in the due diligence document, we include a copy of the request of the state, and we gave them a range. I think it was from 128 to 160. So it certainly has gone up. Obviously, there's additional square footage. Yeah, so they came in on the low.
Yeah, and
not insignificant. I'm not saying $120 is not significant dollars.
Yeah, and just for what it's worth, I think the number changed a number of times. I think the initial conversation was something like 80, and then we asked the governor for 100, and then as we got sharper on the numbers, we got that we had a range and it went higher. It's just, I think we need to just continuously be transparent about the numbers so that everybody can stay with, who has supported us on this project, just stay with us about the numbers as they evolve and what the state's piece was.
Yeah, good one.
Judith, I have a question. Can this be something we can go back to the state and ask for more money too?
Well, this was part of the one-time money expenditures. I mean, this would be something we should talk to Lisa about. It's awfully late in the session to be making a new ask, but I think that question would be best answered by Lisa Merrick, the district's government affairs perspective.
I think it's also a fairly safe assumption that an ask for a charter school is not likely to gain a lot of political support in this session and with this legislature.
We could ask them though, if the 120 is, I mean, I'm not suggesting we do this, but maybe a different way to think about it, to your point, Amy, is that the base project is actually more than 120.
Yeah.
And maybe you get that delta.
And
But
the rationale there would be that the estimates before were based on master plan. Now we have, more
Right.
design development. We have cost escalation,
And
and we have some defensible reasons.
I don't think it says no, so
Right.
you don't lose nothing.
I love your optimism, Gary.
That's it for our presentation. We just want to make a comment about next steps. We have more discussion, of course, is to continue with community engagement. There's more efforts coming forward, including a big one on Monday. And then we'll be back in front of you on May 10th. Next step.
Okay. So have we, with these scenarios here, have we shown this to Kairos as well?
Yes. So we do have preliminary narrative. I'm not sure if that's interesting to you all or if you want to wait until we get the next round of engagement after Monday. But of course, to honor the previous engagement approach with having a dedicated committee, we've invited them to all of the opportunities that we've created. So that has included the Center for Black Student Excellence Guiding Coalition, which was a long form weekend engagement series. So there were multiple entry points for that. We joined the Kairos Family Council, the Harriet Tubman Family Night, the Kairos Parent Teacher Conferences, the Jefferson Design Advisory Group, and then also launched a virtual survey. And our respondents have been faculty and staff, parents and caregivers, and community members. So that's been the effort. We have some recurring questions that we're seeing, mostly around timeline, as that continues to go back and forth quite a bit. From the Kairos community, there are quite a few questions about to what extent school climate and culture can be shared. So students who are having a particular experience at Kairos, how can Harriet Tubman be in partnership to impact that? Scenario 1 is favored primarily by people who are from the Portland area or who've been invested for a really long time. They appreciate that the schools are physically separate and at least each school gets some of their own. Scenario 2 is favored for the open space and the availability to community members to potentially access what is currently the dog park,
Jefferson, South Lot.
the South Lot. Yeah, and scenario 2 is also favored by community members who don't want the Jefferson project to be as heavily impacted. There are a handful of people that are saying that neither of these scenarios work because the school shouldn't have to do any trade-offs at all, which has been really interesting. I have a few more sections, so just let me know what is interesting to you.
Why is scenario 2 perceived as less of an impact on Jefferson, given that they lose that south part lot for their athletic programming in either scenario?
Scenario 2, they retain it. They retain the baseball, softball, and multi-purpose field.
Oh, so I thought that was designating that open space for the elementary and middle school. So they then have basically zero.
I think there's an assumption that there will be some sharing of the south lots. they may have to even cross the street to go to recess.
Yeah.
And so there's going to need to be probably some sharing of that, but from an athletic improvement standpoint for Jefferson, they'll effectively get the full.
So it basically means that that Tubman wouldn't have outdoor athletic space outside of school hours. Either that or Jefferson's athletic program has been significantly impacted. I mean, during the day, that's fine, you can cross that little street, but.
So in our engagement, there are a couple of different buckets of feedback that we're getting. So we've asked people about the guiding principles and feedback on that, and we have a series of guiding principles that people want to offer. We've also asked people about their excitement and concerns, and we've been able to theme that into, chunks of things. So you all let me know if you want me to address any of that, or we can wait until our next.
Well, I'm interested in if there is if there's much questioning around our foundational principles that we've set forth regarding with the catchment and what our minimum requirements, because, maybe if the community sees things differently in terms of what our foundational values are, we should look at revising them.
Well, people affirm the guiding principles for the most part. I would say that they even think some of it is unrealistic.
Like what?
Particularly, I think, Harriet Tubman not being a small school, that was something that I think you talked about a little bit earlier, that it might be hard to actually execute on something like that, given where the conversation is.
Wait, what do you mean? To execute on
Not making Harriet Tubman Middle School a small school.
Say that again, because I'm getting these double negatives. So that it would be that the community would resist if we changed our ed specs, or if we waived our expectation around enrollment there, or
no. So they are affirming of the guiding principles, but they think that it's a stretch to actually live up to the standard of the guiding principles.
Can you put the guiding principles?
And the issue regarding enrollment is that, one of our foundational beliefs about our ed specs is that they apply to all like schools. And that's how we've run our bond program. But if we're building a new middle school in an era where we know that we've had significant enrollment shifts and declines, and that looks like it's going to continue to be the case, then we should be having a conversation about what our expectations are there, because you also have seen really declining enrollment at Ockley Green.
So Director Constant, would you take that same approach for high schools? Because we've been building them at 1,700. Jefferson's been at 1,700, even though enrollment's about 600.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. And it's not too late for Jefferson, and it's not too late for Ida B. Wells and Cleveland. When you learn more, you
Do differently.
You do differently. Yeah.
And now that I'm looking at these on the screen, the one thing that we also did see in the data, it's not around all, community members, so, but we saw Irvington and some Sabin families mentioned how the commute was a little bit inconvenient going to, the Jefferson area. And so in the raw data, we're saying, well, have you considered just making them K-8s? So those are just a couple of the community narratives that have also come up.
Interesting. So not having a Harriet Tubman anymore.
Or Harriet Tubman's a K-8.
Or
No,
just those
making
particular
those
schools.
two schools.
But then then where does your enrollment come from for Tubman? Yeah.
I'm just reflecting back.
So
to what I heard.
honestly, not any further than going to where Tubman's located now.
Yeah.
For them.
So my other question is, we're going along with, I love the community engagement piece as well. How we talk with Kairos leadership about these two scenarios.
Yes.
And what are their feelings?
Oh, okay. So Kairos leadership, they are a fan of scenario one, where every school gets their own plot.
they believe that scenario 2 is, it doesn't give any school the best.
I think it's fair to say they feel that pretty strongly.
Yes.
They want that separation of the campuses.
All right.
Okay.
That's it for our piece.
Any questions? Okay.
So, I mean, I think, to me, in the trajectory of this conversation, the onus is now on the board to talk about the challenging issues, which in my mind are around financing. So if we're gonna look at doing something that is $75 to $100 million more than what we got, what are our ideas about how we're gonna get there? I mean, logistically speaking, the timing works with a new bond because presumably we go out for a bond in 2024, which gives adequate planning time and construction time based on this schedule.
Yeah.
So we'd have to have that conversation probably sooner than we'd like about whether that would be included in there. I like the idea of going back to the state now that we have harder cost estimates on this to look at that delta, but that doesn't address the question of how do we finance
The rest of it.
Kairos, which is something that we hadn't anticipated, but it could be it could be part of a new bond. So for me, that's on the board. We need to address those questions because staff has kind of done what they've done. And then the other issue that's on us is, are we willing to look at adjusting our enrollment expectations? Because, you know, even though we've had these ed specs for all of our modernizations where one of our values has been that all of our comprehensive high schools are going to be the same, the reality, even pre-modernization, post-modernization, is that they're not. They don't end up the same. And so, you know, maybe we just look at that a little bit differently and a little bit more realistically, I'd say, because we know that in the next few years, we're going to be facing consolidation of some of our schools. And so we have to be realistic about enrollment, and part of the reason why we have those expectations in the ed specs is because they're driven by program. Like, in order to have a comprehensive array of electives and, you know, accommodate the space needs, then you got to have a certain number of kids for an economy of scale and a certain amount of square footage. But, you know, if the district is going to consider that, the impetus has to come from the board, because right now they're just marching to the ed specs.
So Director Constam, I think 2 points to what you said. Number one, I think, as you can see, we are, and appreciate you noting that, I think beyond the community engagement, I think we've gotten to a place where we've reviewed, you know, 24 or so possible sites. We're down to these two options. If you really think about it, what you heard both from engagement and from staff is there's really one option on the table. So you started to get into questions around finance and structure and all of those things. And to your point about this is now on the board, I think we're at a place, a pivotal point where asking the board collectively to issue a set of authorizing the superintendent to pursue X, Y, and Z, right? And so I think I'd like to work with Board Chair or Vice Chair Hollins and Chair Scott, thank you, to put that on the late May agenda when you also will be voting on the Center for Black Student Excellence. Obviously, we will have a budget session or a facilities and operations sessions on May 10th, so that would be a chance for you to kind of have that conversation there. So that's point number one. Point number two, I would be remiss if I didn't just add to your comment about, and maybe ask it in a form of a question. So to your point, you know, with enrollment declining, utilization rates are going down or will fluctuate, particularly in some of the schools that we've talked about in the neighborhood, right? Whether it's King, Irvington, Elliott, you know, these neighborhoods are you're looking at anything from 40% to 60% utilization rate. And again, it's going to fluctuate. So I guess my question to you all, as you think about that, I know Vice Chair Hollins has said, no, we're narrowing down to two options. And I also want to respect and acknowledge our grounding principles that we wouldn't divert any schools, you know. But again, I guess all that to say is I'm trying to figure out the board's appetite or interest in ideas around building smaller elementary schools adjacent to each other. Again, I don't want to go into a new lane if that's not the wishes of the board, but I felt the need to bring it up given that you raised the utilization rate.
Where I would go from where you were there is to say it's on the board to have a conversation about whether we want to revisit our guiding principles around, impacting the program of some of those feeder elementary schools, because the truth may be that whether it's this process or whether it's a follow-on process of consolidation driven by enrollment decline, the programs of those elementary schools may well be impacted in the coming years. And so do we address that value now?
Yeah, so I just want to add one comment. I just want to, flag that when we were in the middle of the legislative session, there was the discussion about the other elementary school programs, and the board and the district made a commitment to Representative Sanchez, who's the Ways and Means Chair, the governor, and others, that we would not be impacting one of the other elementary schools in the feeder pattern. And I think there was a press release also about it. So I just want to note that was part of the discussion. And given that Representative Sanchez, this is in her legislative district, that it was very much a topic that was covered as part of the conversations around the $120 million that we received from the legislature, not just with the legislature, but also with the governor.
Let me make sure I'm clear. So I want to make sure we're clear. So I think when we're talking about the consolidation piece, we're not talking about for this particular, the Tubman Cairo situation. I think, and to help me if I'm wrong, I'm thinking we're talking about futuristic consolidations of, our underutilized schools, but not necessarily this project here. I might be wrong on that, but that's kind of what I'm hearing. It's not in relationship to this project as far as looking at our under-enrolled schools. It's more later on as we continue to go into our rebuilding phases, our modernization phases of all of our schools, that those conversations are going to need to be had because of underutilization of our schools, not necessarily this project here.
Okay, it's because it came up in the context of this project is why I thought it was connected to it, and just again because I was part of those conversations, wanted to just put that out there that we have some commitments that we made about this project. So if we're going to talk about other future consolidations, it should just be very clear that it's unrelated to this project.
Okay.
And it might be worth recirculating the press release or the communication we put out to, I think, both the school communities and that was shared publicly.
Yeah,
regarding.
I'll take a look at that, Director Permetowicz. If I recall correctly, I thought we used the word displace. Again, I'm not here to wordsmith, but I'll take a look at that. But again, and I just want to presenting that as we think operationally long term. I'm just putting that for your consideration, that these are the things that we're thinking about as we're coming to a closer to a decision, right? That we're thinking about these utilization rates, because again, you're looking at 40 to 60%. So again, something for you to weigh as you're making decisions. So we wanted to just make sure you have that context.
That's it.
Next topic.
Next topic.
All right, the next topic is an update on the Center for Black Student Excellence.
All right.
Am I supposed to present?
It's
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me get into the Zoom.
You know, I have the PDF if you just want me to present that, if that's easier for you.
Sure.
Okay.
Or
Recording in progress.
I love it. I love ideas.
Recording in progress.
How's that?
okay. All right, so good afternoon, evening, everybody. I'm Camille Idedevo, use she, her pronouns, and I lead PPS Innovation Studio and have the privilege of being the project lead for the Center for Black Student Excellence Design and Engagement process. This afternoon, we're simply going to talk about the past several months of community co-design to put some meat on the bones of what the Center for Black Student Excellence actually will be. And so this is just a checkpoint, a moment in time. This is not the fully refined and fleshed out vision, but I thought it was important to bring this before the board. So we know that when we started this project, that we started with a concept that knowing that we wanted to be really bold and audacious about shifting the trajectory of what was happening with our students. And so we, the Innovation Studio, which is our in-house problem-solving accelerator, was tapped to take this complex sort of challenge and opportunity and facilitate this process. So there are a few things that will be coming to the board for you all to review. Ultimately, we're bringing forth a vision for the Center for Black Student Excellence that will describe it both as a place, so they're an actual infrastructure of some sort, also an approach. So with the various strategies to shift the Black student experience, and then also some recommendations about how our system also needs to be examined to make any of this a reality. All right, so moving forward, next. Yeah. So again, ultimately, I've just described what this is. It'll be a pretty comprehensive visioning document. I want to note that since we started the project, we've shifted the language just to make sure that we weren't confusing anybody about what you all can expect. Because apparently there are construction terms that are used that we didn't want to, confuse folks when we say a comprehensive plan. And so we just shifted it to a vision that describes these three components. So the approach, the place, and then the redesign piece of the system. Moving forward, this is somewhat review, but I just want to note that the ethos of the Innovation Studio, next slide, is really that we are in partnership with community, that it's not just a one-way flow of information, but that we are truly working shoulder to shoulder in co-creating and designing solutions. And in this case, it is working shoulder to shoulder and designing with the Black community in particular, driving what is best for Black students. So also, as a refresher, there have been many collaborators, many partners on the team. I'll work through this next section relatively quickly, next slide, but you all know that I am the project lead.
Dr. Cheryl Proctor is the deputy superintendent as well as the executive sponsor, and it's been a pleasure to work alongside her during this process. She has been with me out in the field, engaging with community. Moving forward, some of our other partners on the project include I Am More, led by Dr. Renee Mitchell, also part of the ethos of the Innovation Studio in our design methodology is that when you're addressing complex challenges, you also have to have a healing orientation, and especially with this project that has centered the Black community, knowing the historical harm that has taken place, we just wanted to make sure that our approach was rooted in healing and restoration first. So that's the role of I Am More. We've also invited Co-Locate Design, who has led by Brian Lee, who has a design justice framework and orientation to help us think about how also this project and the way that we think about physical space is restorative. Next up, we have Joy Elise Davis, leading Imagine Black Futures, who has really been instrumental in the mixed method data analysis. So helping us to see what types of Black people we are engaging, where are we extending our engagement to, and also how we leverage art as a form of engagement and various things like that. So excited to have Joy Elise and the Imagine Black team on the project. Next, we also have editorial and design partners helping us with our constant communication, but then also the visual storytelling about how this work is evolving over time. So we have Cliff Chestnut with 30 Point Strategies and Diego Caballero with Marketing Box. Moving forward, we have a cross-functional design team of both staff and partners who have come together on this effort to help drive our engagement approach. So I won't spend too much time here. Moving forward, as we talked about in December, our design process has been broken up into a few different phases. The first phase of our work was focused on understanding why. Why are we doing this? Establishing and reestablishing some critical relationships that are necessary to drive this project forward. Again, framing our engagement approach through the lens of healing, but then ultimately interrogating what are the needs that the Center for Black Student Excellence needs to be responsive to. And so for the first few months of the work, we were in schools, speaking directly with students and speaking directly with staff about what the current experience is. We can keep going. And so there were some key activities and dates between September and November.
Can you go back?
Yes.
As far as the stuff that we did in September, where are we at with that? As far as with the board adopting the resolution to coding, where we're at with that whole process?
Mm-hmm. Want to speak to that?
Sure. So we are going to, the Center for Black Excellence nonprofit organization has not been formed. We are working with our outside partners to share with them the 6 representatives from PPS. We are proposing that go on the consent agenda later this month. And so we would provide them the 6 representatives of PPS at the end of this month. And my understanding is that the reason for the CBE nonprofit not being founded is they were waiting to hire the executive director, which I believe they will be doing in the next week or 2.
In lieu of the formal organization not being founded, we've still worked collaboratively with the organizations. So Albina Vision Trust, as an example, we've done some engagement with them, SCI. So the various organizations that are on the steering committee now, we have found multiple entry points through our engagement approach to make sure that their staff and the communities that they represent have been included in the process. So, yeah, phase one, this is what you see on the screen is a Harriet Tubman Community Night that was back in the fall, as just one example of opportunities that we created to understand and give platform to what the experience in schools are. Next slide, please. I shared this with you all in December, but there are some narratives that emerged out of that initial design research, where, you know, students articulated what they were needing from staff, a lot of it being social emotional in nature. When people actually describe and put words to what is Black student excellence, it really being rooted in culture and identity, and some ways that we will know whether or not we are seeing Black excellence in front of us. We'll move forward. So not only in the first few months were we speaking with students, as you all very well know as board members, we also had to take a look at what the data says about the condition of Black students. And it's heartbreaking that, right, our numbers look the way that they do. 3rd grade reading, 5th grade math, 8th grade reading, graduation, safety. So it was the data as well as successful school surveys that combined with the design research that we were doing. I want to pause and just say the reason for the entire what we call phase one is because in the Innovation Studio, we believe in problem-driven innovation. So we don't believe in just random acts of innovation, but we have to have a direction. And so we were given a call to action to, right, put some meat on the bones of the Center for Black Student Excellence, but we had to ask ourselves, well, what does the Center for Black Student Excellence actually need to be responsive to? So the data on the screen, what we saw and what we heard in schools, that all of that work culminated into, next slide, us actually being able to author a problem statement around what the Center for Black Student Excellence was going to respond to. And our problem statement reads, decades of underinvestment, systemic racism, next slide, lack of coordinated systems of support, and discriminatory practices have resulted in an enduring opportunity and achievement gap for Black students in Portland. I highlight that sentence about coordinated systems of support because it's not that we don't have amazing talent in the district necessarily. It's not that we don't have amazing partners, but part of the challenge is when you don't have a cohesive and a coordinated effort moving in the direction of Black students, you see the type of narrative and the data from the previous slides. Now, I am an optimist. I am an optimist and I have to be to stay in this work. And so we didn't stop at the problem. Where we went next was great. We understand what the challenges are, but what's the opportunity in front of us? And our opportunity statement is that we get to redefine the future by, one, advancing a culture of Black excellence while meaningfully integrating joy and healing. Dr. Mitchell likes to reference this research that it's not our students' head that's wrong, but they have broken hearts. And so how, in our effort to cultivate this culture of Black student excellence, do we actually embed joy and healing in the approach? How do we unify and elevate the Black educational experience and ultimately drive those outcomes for Black students? Well, we do that through the Center for Black Student Excellence, which is not just a place, but it's also an approach and it's also a system redesign, similarly modeled after our own vision, PPS Reimagined. So we had a problem statement, we had an opportunity statement, and then we started to understand that we were not just talking about infrastructure. It would all be for naught if we created a pretty building, but then the experience that students was having did not change. And so we started to transition into phase two of our process, which was focused on inspiration and ideation. And this is where we were pulling exemplars of different people and places, both locally and nationally, who were advancing Black excellence in some way, and we learned from them. We created more interactive engagement experiences. And so what you see on the screen is very early on in December, we did there was a lecture by the Architectural Heritage Center about preserving Black spaces. Next slide, we partnered with Word is Bond on a really neat experience where there were students who were leading a walk through the Albina community, which is our geographic footprint, where we're focusing in on. So we have the Black students that you quite literally see on the screen. We're leading various cohorts of people through a walk about their experience. That was really fun. Moving forward, we partnered with the National Association of Minority Contractors and Young, Gifted, and Black to host a Black Professionals Expo with the idea that we wanted to get people thinking about, well, what is the future world of work? What are the career pathways that we might want to be preparing students for through our Center for Black Student Excellence efforts? That was a neat opportunity. We also hosted a Portland City tour. So hopefully what you're seeing is how rooted this engagement process has been. But we hosted a Portland City tour where we partnered with various organizations who locally are exemplifying Black excellence, and we learned from them. So this is at a local restaurant, Black owned, at Akati PDX, they hosted us. But we also visited places like, next slide, so BEAM, Black Educational Achievement, what is the acronym? BEAM was our anchor partner for this experience. And they have what is called learning hubs. And so we visited all of the BEAM learning hubs that are focused on various things. What you see on the screen is a focus on sustainability and agriculture and things like that. The next slide, we visited the Mayo House, which is a project that was taken on by a community member to restore, to restore a historically significant home and turn it into a learning archive. We visited the BEAM headquarters, where we have a community member that quite literally dedicated their home, to teaching and learning for youth. So that was, yes, Ms. Noni. So that was incredible. We visited the Soul Restoration Center, where we learned a lot about how do you curate spaces for social emotional learning. So that was fun. We also created virtual engagement experiences. We partnered with the Museum of the African Diaspora out of San Francisco to focus on, well, what is the role of art and art history in the Center for Black Student Excellence efforts? And so that was another opportunity. We partnered with the Jefferson High School theater department to students wrote and produced a few different plays on gun violence. And so the conversation and the people that we invited to that was how we address community safety and a sense of belonging. And so that was the conversation that was prompted in the hallway. Lastly, we also created a virtual asynchronous experience for people, and through what we call our Learning Journey microsite, which I believe is still up on the website. This is where we compiled videos, pictures, primary source documents like the baseline essays, all sorts of things, again, from both locally and nationally, for people to actually dig into and to explore what's already out there. And what people are already doing to exemplify Black student excellence. We had our guiding coalition, number 2, which is where we focused on student voice. We had a student fishbowl, and that's the first guiding coalition that we really started to dig into possibility. Well, in response to now what we know is the problem, where do we see the Center for Black Student Excellence going? And in addition, we started to work on things like the brand identity and various other things. Next slide. We, in this effort for the past several months, it's been a lift. It's been a lift, but we have created more than 80 opportunities, 80 touch points with students, staff, community members, partners. It's been incredible. It's been a labor of love, and it's been necessary. So I'm not supposed to be emotional.
You got it, you got it.
Go for it.
You got it.
That's the optimism coming through.
Yeah, but sorry, y'all.
It's okay. Take your time, take your time.
We have invited the community that has experienced intergenerational trauma to dream again. And I kind of can't believe that we've done this, but from church leaders to people who have been impacted by gun violence, people who are still active, people who represent Black, Greek letter organizations, families, staff, partners. This has truly been a labor of love because Black students are worth it. And like I said, when you go back to the earlier slides, I'm not interested in having conversations about debating why we're focusing on Black students when our data looks the way that it does. When our schools are not yet the places that we need them to be. So this is what we've done moving forward. Apologies.
No apologies needed.
We moved into the next guiding coalition number 3, where we started to focus more on physical space. So guiding coalition number 2, we were focusing more on strategies in response to the challenges. Guiding coalition number 3, we focused more on grade. Now we're starting to see where this is going, what kind of infrastructure, what kinds of spaces will support the Center for Black Student Excellence efforts. People during that guiding coalition also started to sequence various priorities. And by guiding coalition number 4, we saw it all come together. Hours and hours of commitment, hours and hours of data processing and writing. And so for the month of March and April, March, we did some more focused stakeholder engagement. And really now that we are in the month of April, as we start to sunset the external engagement, we're focusing more inward on staff interviews, understanding the way that the system is currently operating, and opportunities to, again, redesign. Every system is perfectly designed for its outcomes. And so if we're not seeing what we want, how might we add a design orientation to it? And so I want to share with you all, as I come to a close on our efforts, I want to share with you all, again, this is draft. I'm on the record saying this is draft. What is coming out of all of this work? So, if you will, close your eyes if you're that kind of a person and you need to imagine. But the emerging vision for the Center for Black Student Excellence. The Center for Black Student Excellence is comprised of a place, an approach, and a redesign of the Portland Public School system to ensure aligned coordination of efforts in the direction of Black students. Undergirded by Black scholarly research, community advocacy, identity, culture, and belonging, students fundamentally experience school differently and are embedded within an ecosystem of care. Outcomes improve exponentially, and students have a plan for their path beyond graduation. The graduate portrait is illuminated for Black students. Community violence has reduced with the return of collectivism and community building, and Portland's model becomes an exemplar on a national scale of the possibilities that emerge when the community and public education system work shoulder to shoulder to redefine the future for Black students. Black student excellence is defined by student efficacy, connection to community, and mastery of content. In addition to core academics, students demonstrate confidence and the skillful ability to share boldly on topics of interest. They recognize that their excellence is innate, and they reclaim their own cultural narratives. Joy is visibly present as students cultivate a practice of healing even on days that they don't feel their best. This is inclusive of all students in the African diaspora, regardless of linguistic, ethnic, and experiential diversity. As a place, students, staff, and community members have dedicated spaces embedded within the schools or within the Center for Black Student Excellence infrastructure to experience Black joy and healing. The infrastructure serves as a resource hub of programs, aid, and multi-use spaces as students gathered for affinity, staff gathers for professional development, and community members gather to facilitate honest discussion. The resources of the space extend digitally for families who've been displaced. As an approach, the standard of excellence is exemplified through measurable outcomes across student, staff, and partner groups. Student leadership development opportunities and self-efficacy are encouraged and supported through peer and intergenerational mentorship. Students have consistency in the PK-12 educational experience that results in high achievement, and students with various developmental and social needs are adequately seen and resourced. Educators with proven track records of success are celebrated, and managed risk-taking is supported. All educators continue to refine their practice and are supported with the necessary professional learning. Black staff retention has increased because the environment has shifted to support their health, safety, growth, and development. Families and caregivers are leveraged for their expertise and coached to navigate the system, including non-Black parents of Black children. Schools become a place for continuous learning, for honest local histories as new families move into the area, and non-Black families are allies in the pursuit of Black student excellence. Lastly, the system redesign is rooted in the redistribution of power from silos to community networks, processes of competition to collaboration, transparency, accountability, and ultimately creating a community ecosystem within the Jefferson, Harriet Tubman, Kairos, Martin Luther King, Boyce Eliot, Humboldt, and displaced families. At the district level, efforts are coordinated to ensure high-quality delivery of service to schools. Teams meaningfully collaborate so that efforts are not duplicated. Community leaders and organizations contribute to a tightly woven community of educators, service providers, community members, and entities working in coordination for the benefit of Black students. But that's separate.
I just wanted to say thank you. I've seen the work, I've seen the lift, and it has been remarkable, the amount of work and effort and just everything that you put into it. The community is buzzing. You know, they are recognizing what's going on. You know, I constantly hear probably 3 or 4 or 5 times a week about what's going on. And it's, you know, getting calls from Noni or from Miss Renee of the optimism they're having. The phone calls of from Senator Margaret Carter, just the joy that they are hearing. I'm hearing in their voice, the joy that they are expressing, and it's a lot of this comes from the work you're doing. And so I just want to say thank you. It's great work. something that should be modeled after from here on out.
And also the sheer numbers of people that have been showing up to these different events. I mean, I have the same, like everywhere I go, somebody says, I went here, I heard about this there, and it's everywhere. It's really feels good.
I want to echo Gary's comments. Thank you so much for this work.
Okay.
If I could add one more thing, Gary.
Yes.
Just remembering, and I hate to even bring it up, but a year and a half ago at a budget meeting, we had a community group come and testify in opposition to this work, and to say, this is undefined, it's not focused, it's a waste of money, shouldn't have been in a bond. And I was offended at the time, and we sort of said something on the record, but I was so excited to go through this before this meeting, this slide deck, and what we said at the time is exactly what we're doing. What we said is, that's intentional. The goal here is to define with community, to co-create, to collaborate, to define something, and that's the work you've done. And I feel like it's important to call out those voices of negativity and name them and say they were wrong. And we knew they were wrong at the time, and you're proving them wrong now. So thank you for this work.
Can I jump in something too? I also wanted to say thank you because this is not the first time I've seen those numbers. I remember the first meeting we had with Boise Elliott, and when I sat down with the principal, I said, what does this school need? Like, how can we help? And she said, get these kids to read. Like they're electronics and stuff. Get them to read, get them to write. And we're doing something on a small scale. You guys are doing huge. We've had an annual program where every March they read as much as they can. If they hit their numbers, they get to have like a big party for it. And what did they do this year?
It went over almost 9,000 minutes.
Wow.
Which was really big from where the numbers started at. So they get to have a dance party this month for the whole entire school. We're doing the whole entire school.
100,000 minutes.
They did over 100,000 ones. That was their.
In March for the reading.
It was a big goal from what they've done in the past years, and so we said whole school like in the past we were doing like the winning classes for each grade, and we said over 100,000. If they hit it, we'll do a party the whole school, and they hit it. They went past it, and so on the 28th, they get to do their dance party, and they pick the decades for the theme. And that was inspired by the Jefferson dancers that came to their school and did their thing, and so really excited about that. So yes,
Wow.
It's been a team effort.
Yeah.
I will never take the credit.
No, you get some flowers.
Oh, for sure.
Yes, you do.
That is huge.
So now, are we supposed to be moving anything forward for the board, or is this?
Yes, you all are voting to adopt or not the vision on the May 23rd board meeting. So you'll get the.
So we have another meeting. We have another FNO meeting on the 10th, right? Okay, so we can. So should we be doing it now? Because they're on the 20th. Oh, we have enough days.
Yeah, we have time.
Okay. Awesome. This is great. When I hear this, right, and I hear the stuff that we're talking about Tubman and Jeff, all this stuff is connected, and that's the beauty of all this. It's all connected, and whether we're talking about facility sizes of schools and athletic spaces, which I am 100% for, right? All this is what helps our kid. It's the whole kid, right? The art stuff we went to yesterday, right? Like all of these things is what we need to make sure that we are providing for each and every kid, and I think we're on the right path. And I just say about that because we got 5 more minutes. So
I just wanted to comment too, like on your emotion and also your comments about optimism, because it's really, really hard to get people to dream authentically when they have no reason to trust in the institution. And we've experienced this in the process with Jefferson, and just like wanting to keep people engaged, wanting to, begging people to serve on the DAG and to be part of the process. And it's really easy to understand why people don't want to give up their time in that way because it hurts so much. And so to see the level of enthusiasm that you expressed, Gary, and that I felt that is really authentic and genuine and widespread is pretty amazing. It's amazing.
All right. So we got 4 minutes. I think we got one last thing on the.
We got one last thing.
You make that quick. You got 4 minutes.
All right.
No worries.
In your packets, there's a staff memo about the existing Harriet Tubman Middle School property and the process for disposing of real property. So just real quick, the administrative directive outlines the steps that are necessary for the district to sell or convey property. A couple of notes there. The superintendent's responsible for making recommendations to the board when property should be declared surplus and sold or otherwise conveyed. Declaring property surplus is a public process and includes findings of impacts to PPS operations, short-term and long-term need assessments, and market valuations. And unless the board makes an express finding that the disposition of real property for less than market rate confers significant benefit to the district and the communities it serves, it notes that all sales of real property should be at maximum market value. Regarding the Tubman property itself, it's an 87,000 square foot building. It's on approximately 3 acres. I think everyone knows that. It's in generally good condition. It's located centrally within the district. And the PBS invested about $18 million in it back in 2018, before that. But there is no agreed upon next use of that property, nor have there been any in-depth studies. I will note that there have been some options that have been discussed loosely, again, no studies, including potential admin space for the district there, professional development space has come up, potential use as part of the development for the Center for Black Student Excellence, and also to sell the property to help support the renovation or the relocation of Tubman. So those are just some of the things that have come up, again, relatively loosely.
Awesome. All right. Anyone have got any more questions, comments, thoughts?
I just want to connect the dots explicitly that at our last facilities and operations meeting, we had a proposal from a consortium led by NAMAC looking to find a site for a workforce development center and talking about Tubman. So that's one thing that is come to the district, and the district hasn't responded. And then, as you mentioned, Dan, I mean, there's 2 things that are mentioned in this memo that we haven't ever discussed, which is the feasibility of relocating these administrative functions at that Tubman site, and then any use of the physical space for the Center for Black Student Excellence. Although I would say, we pretty much made a commitment that we're not going to have children, and particularly young children, in that site because of the air quality concerns. So, that's something that we have to revisit. But I just want us to be clear about all those things that are kind of swirling around.
So Director Constant, you said, just want to be clear, you said the district hasn't responded. Is there so I'm assuming this is at the board level. So the last meeting we were asked to share information with you all about, Tubman. And so I just want to make sure there's clear direction leaving this room about any possible steps, given that I just don't want to, I want to make sure that there's no expectation that staff is responding in some way to a request.
Well, Gary, you can correct me, but what we discussed in that meeting was that they are in active conversations about this workforce development proposal and looking for sources of funding. And it's basically would be a lot easier for them to go tell their story if they were able to say that the district has indicated in some way that Tubman may be available for lease. And so there was no specific direction for staff to do a feasibility study, but there was a request that the district consider it from these outside parties because, that would be very helpful to them as they're moving forward and trying to lock in.
So I think what we do is, because I know we asked for them to bring in more information, so maybe we invite them to the next F&O meeting on the 10th. I know with some of the questions and stuff, a more comprehensive piece that they wanted to bring in as well. So maybe we'll have them come in on the 10th.
And we gave them the information that they were looking for
Right.
to
To
evaluate whether it was even
Right,
suitable,
right.
which they
So I
hadn't
think
had
that's-
before.
So I think the next day, we just invite them to the next one, see what they present. They will present a more comprehensive proposal, and then we can kind of move forward from there.
So I haven't had a chance to watch the last F&O committee. Do we have something from NAMAC? I haven't seen it.
Not an official proposal. They came in with I don't know if it was an official proposal.
It's a letter.
A letter of interest in the Tubman site. And so we had them.
Who has
come in.
that letter? I just haven't seen the letter. So has that
Um,
gone to the board, or could we get that to the board?
It came-
Well,
yeah.
it came originally to the board
while
like
back.
9 months ago
Yeah.
or something,
Okay.
maybe around September. And I think actually what they brought back last time was just the same. It was the
Yeah.
same as that original letter.
Okay.
I can
Yeah,
recirculate
we can
it.
make sure you get it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things I'm not a committee member on F&O, but I'm on the board. I think I want to make sure that any I mean, if we're considering, because when I read this memo, thank you for connecting the dots for me.
Mhm.
That was helpful because I haven't had a chance to watch the last F&O committee. I mean, I think we need to make sure we're thinking comprehensively about our
Right.
properties. So, like, when we're evaluating an idea that comes to us from the outside, I think it's important for us to evaluate that against all the other, potential uses, right? And it may be a great use, whether it's the highest and best use of the facility. I imagine that's going to take some time and thinking, right?
And honestly, the first time I'd ever seen staff put down in writing what other prospective uses of Tubman might be is in this memo for today's meeting. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Because I think when I hear you say it will be easier for NAMAC to raise money if this district commits, that begins to make me very nervous because I don't see us committing. Well, I'll speak for myself. I don't know anything about this proposal. It's the first time I'm hearing about it. So for me to get to a point of the district committing is a very, very lengthy process because when government gives away, either through a lease or land, like we need to make sure we've done all of our due diligence on that. So I guess that's what I'm interested in. What's our due
Yeah.
diligence process for evaluating this proposal, bringing it back? I think it's a great idea, but then evaluating it against all the other potential uses.
and I agree, and I'm
Great.
interested in
I
that
think
too.
I think that's the
this
process
memo
we'll
is
go
good.
through,
Yeah.
having them come back, with their, second or more comprehensive proposal. And then we can start really having those deep conversations about, the best use for the facilities. And then as a committee, if we decide to make a recommendation to the board or not, but I agree with exactly what we plan on doing.
Great.
So Director or Vice Chair Hollins, no staff needs at this time.
No staff needs that.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right,
Thank
we're
you,
done.
everybody.